Welcome back into the Building New Beliefs 60-Day Micro Habit Challenge. Thank you for clicking this video and continuing on this journey, especially as we go through the reflect, measure, and progress process. And you are reflecting on your insights, impacts, and appreciation throughout this process. I hope you appreciate yourself for going this far in a journey and then continuing to measure how much do we agree with this new belief. And I hope that you're seeing yourself continuing to progress towards strongly agreeing with your new belief, especially as you start to see the impact in the world. I know this time has been both challenging and very rewarding. So I hope that you are experiencing that too. And we know to truly move closer to that strongly agree that we can really embrace that new belief in our lives. We have to use a combination of the evidence, meaning, and choice. And over the last couple of sessions, we've been focusing in on choice and breaking that down. And there's plenty of choices to be made, and the types of choices we make for a given situation make all the difference. And with that, we will dive back into choice. And as a recap, we've covered prepare, we've covered repair, we've covered reset, and now we're going into recommit. Now, you might be asking yourself right here at the top, what are we asking you to recommit to? We're asking you to recommit to being bigger than your bias. And you might have heard this phrase in the workshop, just to remind you here that we already are bigger than our bias. A lot of people allow bias to be overwhelming and make it seem like bias is in control of us versus the opposite way around. So we want to recommit to being bigger than our bias, knowing that again, we can use the brain and how the brain works to form new beliefs and to make choices that are more in line with who we want to be. So that requires us to truly commit to being bigger than our bias. And you might remember this from the workshop when we're saying that having bias is not your fault. We all have bias, and you don't have to be bad to have bias. We all have it. So it is not your fault that you have bias, but what you do with it is your responsibility. Boom, that is in your hands, that is in your control. And that's what we wanted. That's what we've been focusing this whole time. What is in your control? It is certainly your bias. And in this conversation, we're going to be asking you to take responsibility, continue taking responsibility. And then what we said in the action class before was that we can reframe responsibility as our ability to respond, our ability to respond to the situations, to the moments where we are called out on our bias or we catch a bias even before anybody says anything. We have the ability to respond. So when we're asking you to recommit, we're asking you to truly take 100% responsibility for how you respond, 100% ownership of how you respond, 100% ownership of your ability to respond to your own bias. We're not asking you to save the world, fix the problems, control how other people respond. We want you to focus 100% of your effort on 100% of your ability to take ownership of your thoughts, your emotions, and your reflexes. So now we're circling back to how this all began with that awareness piece and really being aware of our thoughts, emotions, and reflexes when we are thinking about a group, when our bias is triggered and we are then holding back or avoiding or even withholding or really holding back a group and their progress in their own lives because of our bias. We have to take ownership of that and take ownership for what we can do to shift that. And Jack Canfield, who talks about this 100% responsibility, says this is the foundational step we all need to take if we truly want to take 100% responsibility for our lives and the results of our lives, even beyond our bias. So I say this towards the end to say, if you're really committed to this is what it takes to move forward, regardless if we're talking about bias or we're talking about your success in general. And we know that they're so interconnected that I want to give you this tool for both your bias and your future success. So I hope that you're getting excited, even if you're a little overwhelmed. Let's get excited about this process. And what's important to understand when I'm asking you to recommit, when Jack Canfield breaks down this 100% responsibility, he generally says no complaining. So whenever we want to complain, we stop the complaining. Instead, I'll show what we do instead. No blaming. So he's like, you really have to take a commitment to not blaming other people for things that are happening in your life. And no excuses. Well, no complaining, no blaming, no excuses. Again, this is the same journey that I'm on. So I already know it's hard what I'm asking you to do. But I'll tell you, in my life, as I started to adopt just this one principle alone out of his many success principles, have radically changed how I approach my whole life and also how I approach my work in this world. And especially when it comes to bias, we generally like to do one of these three things when we're called out on a bias or when something comes up or we catch ourselves having a bias. We're going to complain about the process or about how sensitive people are. We're going to blame other people. We're going to come up with excuses, which means that we're going to be starting to defend ourselves, defend our worldview. What if we put a pause on all that? What if we said, okay, I'm going to take 100% responsibility for my life. I'm no longer going to complain, because when I complain, and I love how Jack Canfield puts it, when we complain, we generally see or we think there's something better that is possible. So instead of complaining, we work towards making that thing possible. We actually work towards making the improvements that we're looking for. Instead of blaming, again, we generally blame somebody because we think that they stopped us from getting a certain result. Instead of blaming the other person, what if we work with the other person or work with other people in order to make those results that we're looking for become true? And then instead of excuses, what if we, instead of making excuses, again, defending ourselves, especially when it comes to bias, instead of defending ourselves, what if we do this instead? We've already been preparing you for this. So we're going to ask you, instead of complaining, blaming, or excuse, I want you to prepare, repair, or reset. So instead of giving excuses, I simply want to repair. We gave you some repair statements. How do I apologize and own what I did? Whether or not I intended to do that, what if I own the impact, the harm that I may have caused in that situation? And in terms of fixing a situation, oftentimes what stops me is when I start to blame somebody else or I'm complaining about them. And I know that passion and heat inside of me when I start to complain about other people. And even in even in our team at Fears Advantage, my team will ask me like what am I really trying to say? And sometimes I'm trying to complain to get people on my side because I want to be right. And so instead of that, let me reset. Sometimes I literally have to reset. And then I gave you those questions to be able to ask yourself. But sometimes it's what's unsaid that we're really trying to communicate when we're complaining, but we're not actively using that kind of terminology to allow us to reset. Instead, we're keeping ourselves stuck in that same conflict cycle. And then worse, we're trying to get other people to join us in that conflict cycle. That's not what we're going to stop that right now, at least if you want to join us on this journey to really deepen in and to recommit. I'm going to stop that complaining. I'm going to address my feelings with the reset process that we showed you. And then I want to make sure that if there's a repair that I need to do, I would go about apologizing or trying to form a better relationship with the people that I have a bias against or that my bias has harmed or that I've been triggered. And that way I want to make sure I go about repairing that. And this is why I'm constantly preparing myself to build stronger relationships. So we gave you those strategies for building trust in relationships. That trust allows me to see there's another human being there, and that human being is more important than my judgments of them. So I'm going to go ahead and start building those relationships by preparing ahead. And again, when we talk about complaining, if we think there's something better we can do, I want to repair whatever relationships I need to make this better happen. And then I'm going to be preparing the relationships I need to as well, preparing myself as well for whatever we need to do to make that better result, that better outcome, that better company, that better culture, the better relationships, the better sales, whatever it is, whatever we're seeking to make better. I want to be preparing myself and preparing the other relationships I need to go on that journey. So that's a lot to say right here. But I would tell you that now that you're coming to the end of this journey, this is one of the steps this is one of the tools you can take forward with you. And again, can help you continue to break through the bias, because anytime the bias comes up, what would prevent us from using these 4 steps that we just showed you, what will prevent that from happening is if we get caught in blaming and complaining and excuses. That's what's going to stop us. So the challenge for you this week is that when you feel that inkling come up and you want to complain about someone or complain about a situation, I want you to figure out how you can prepare, repair, or reset instead. Again, the reset is that place where you get a chance to get those emotions out, get those words out, but you're doing it in a more focused way that focuses your attention on what else is better. What else can you do to make your life situation, this circumstance better? Same thing when you want to blame, stop the blame and pivot towards prepare, repair, or reset. And with excuses, and by the way, with the blaming, I don't want you blaming yourself either. I want you figuring out, how do you reset? How do you take care of yourself? What do you need to repair for yourself in order to, what are things you need to apologize to yourself for? And this is why We don't want you thinking that you're a bad person for having bias. We want you to think that you can continue to get better as long as you go on this journey. And what's important for us is to really see that when we are making excuses, we're blaming or complaining, we're really letting our bias dictate what we think is supposed to happen. And we know that biases can really impact our ability and our expectations in the world. So this is going even beyond how biases affect our relationships. It really affects all of our expectations. So when we get into blaming, complaining, and excuses, we're saying that our bias is dictating our view of the world, and our bias has determined what's right. But when we're living bigger than our bias, we're saying, great, when I get new information, and new information can even be new evidence, can even be when things are difficult or when things change. When I get that new evidence and new information, I can shift my expectation, which means I'm also shifting my bias, which means that I am bigger than my bias, just like you are bigger than your bias. So that is your assignment for this week. And I'll leave you with this quote. It says, "Nothing in your life will change for the better until you do." Nothing in your life will change for the better until you do. For most of us, we already know what a life of complaining, blaming, and excuses can get us. A lot of people do not know what a life of 100% responsibility can bring us. So, my challenge to you is to start to create that life for yourself by taking 100% responsibility and choosing to prepare, repair, and reset instead. That will close us out for today and this Building New Beliefs 60-Day Micro Habit Challenge. Thank you again for continuing on this journey. And if this is going to be one of the most challenging ones, please use the link below to book office hours to really think through and support yourself, right? Get the support you need to really challenge that blaming and complaining and excuse mind, because those things are automatic in our mind. When we start to break those apart, we can all use some help in doing that. So please book the office hours below so we can support you in that journey and just also celebrate you for getting this far in this journey. We're looking forward to some more progress as well as to some more celebrations. We'll see you soon. Bye.